First of all, want to talk about the economy and the TUC's positions, and of course, they are happy. It appears yesterday, at least they got some 10%. They were struggling for some 20% of the rise, and they got some 10% of that, and the minimum wage has now been pegged at 6 cedis instead of the earlier 5.25 pesos, so to speak. Now, let's take a listen briefly to the TUC's boss and the president, and then we'll come to do the discussion. All right, I understand that we don't have those presently available. We'll just go ahead with the discussion, and as and when the production team gets those ready, we'll listen to the president, we'll listen to the TUC boss as well on the question of the economy. Now, I'd like to start with you, Mr. Dominic Nito. The labor were asking, for pay rise at a time when they were obviously aware of the economic situation, and there are those who have said that they shouldn't have been asking for that. So we have heard people like Clement Apake, presidential staffer, saying that they didn't have the moral right to ask for that because they are the ones who are supposed to produce, and productivity is lacking, so they should not be asking for more. Somehow, fortunately, yesterday they went to the negotiating table and they managed to get something. You may not belong to their class, but what do you say about that?
Let me greet our cherished listeners. There are those who make us, who make the program what it is.
Right.
So let me say good morning to them. I believe that the TUC were justified in what they did. Though the TUC had described the economy as weak, the economy as almost a rundown economy, and that things were not going well, TUC still demanded that something be done to cushion the hard economic reality. TUC were caught in a catch-22 situation. Yes, they agreed that the economy was not good. At the same time, their members needed to survive. Over the last 1 year, just go back to 1 year, over the last period of 1 year, there have been very serious decisions that were taken by this government and agencies of this government that has made wage increase a non-negotiable position anyway. So I was very surprised when government came out with the 2013-14 budget that said that, well, they wanted to freeze wage increase. It was unrealistic. It was a position that government itself should have known that they couldn't have been able to achieve. Particularly the fact that they had not done their homework in trying to talk to all these organizations, talk to all the TUC, talk to labor union, talk to all the people who you employ, and let them know the difficulty that is there. Be very open, be very transparent to them. I'm sure that people would have understood. But when you start increasing utilities, when you start increasing fuel, you start putting the pressure back on the people, and inflation is going up. Obviously, if the person had a 500 Ghana cedi, and that could buy himself things, that could take him home, and now it cannot be able to take you home, what do you expect him to do? He will put pressure on you to increase salaries, and that's what they have done. So for me, I'm not surprised that government caved in.
It's like if you were an employer, and I don't know if you are in some respect, and you just don't have money. Your workers are not producing sufficiently enough, and you're unable to meet your overheads and everything else, and yet the workers are demanding that you should give them more. That's unrealistic.
You see, workers are like a household. They are like children, okay? You are the father of the household. If you tell your children you don't have money to buy rice for them, every day they eat certain type of food, and they say, we want rice. And you say, you don't have money to buy rice, of course, perfume rice or whatever. But they see you, the father, eating rice every day. Their children are going to demand the rice because they believe you can afford. That is what is the situation. When the workers look at the ruling class, they look at the politicians, they look at the people who associate with government appointees, and see suddenly that
they've not had a pay rise.
They may not have a pay rise, but then they see that the lifestyle of these people has not changed over the period, has not deteriorated over the period. In fact, has gone up a little bit, a little notch. Their lifestyle has gone up a little notch. People are obviously not going to believe what you are saying. They may know the reality on the ground, but they will say, no, we also need to survive. And so that is that. But I will just say something. Government, every government, when it is hot, every government, when they have problems, you put in certain decisions and certain measures to ensure that you ameliorate that. But when you don't do that, and you tend to always look at the next election and make promises that people think that, well, it means you have money, it's going to happen. I'll give you one example. The president is reported today in Daily Graphic saying that he's going to offer free shoes to school children. That is not a sign to tell anybody that this government doesn't have money or the economy is a rundown economy. When the government comes to say, a year ago, you said free education is not good. Then suddenly you come to tell the whole world that, well, I'm going to offer free education to people. It's not a sign to anybody that you believe the economy is a rundown economy or you don't have the money. People are going to say you have the money. But what is the reality on the ground? The reality is that there is simply no money sitting down there.
I see.
That's the reality.
Let me just read the agreement that was reached at the end of the negotiations, and this was signed by George Smith Graham, the Chief Executive Officer for the Fair Wages and Salaries Commission, on behalf of the government, and on the other hand by Kofi Asamoah, General Secretary, Secretary General of the Trades Union Congress, on behalf of Labour. Now, this is what they agreed. It says that, I'm reading the agreement, it says that the Public Services Joint Standing Negotiating Committee, comprising government, represented by the Fair Wages and Salaries Commission, Ministry of Finance and Ministry of Employment, and Labour Relations, on one hand, and Organized Labour, on the other, have today, the 2nd of May 2014, concluded negotiations on public sector wage adjustments and agreed as follows. Number one, that in 2014, cost of living allowance, what is referred to as COLA, will be paid in lieu of an increase in the base pay on the single spine salary structure. So that's the basis. Two, that the COLA will represent 10% of the 2013 basic salary. And finally, three, that the COLA will be paid monthly, effective May 2014. Just hold on briefly for me. The question that some would ask immediately is that government has identified that paying of salaries and wages has burdened this economy. It is one of the reasons things are getting bad. And yet, government succumbs to a 10% hike in cost of living allowance for workers. Where is it going to find the money now?
Well, Sami, from the outset, I had problems with the demands of the TUC for an increase in their wages.
You did?
Yes, I did. And I share in Dr. Park's sentiments that if you consider the fact that productivity is very low and the TUC is at the center of productivity, then you'd come to understand that the timing for the demands for an increase in the minimum wage is not realistic. Nevertheless, they went on and...
but it is realistic that things have gone up. The prices of goods and services have gone up.
You see, when I listened to the TUC General Secretary on May Day, when he spoke, he said that government propagandists had actually made a lot of capital out of the implementation of the single spine pay policy, and that we should refrain from talking about it. But the truth of the matter is that we have to talk about this. He failed to admit that that is a policy which inured to the benefit of workers in the public sector, as opposed to those in the informal sector, to the extent that 2/3 of all revenue generated in this country is spent, 2/3, that is a fact, is spent on servicing, the wage bill. So, Sabi, the question some of us ask ourselves is that if we continue to, if you like, yield to the demands of the TUC in the manner in which we have done, what is going to be left for the informal sector? Agric, industry, etc. And so that is why I think that the TUC ought to have understood that we are in difficult times. And the General Secretary clearly listed some of the difficulties, the challenges that bedevil us at this point in time, and went on to admonish that government should not go to the IMF and World Bank for a bailout. So what it simply means is that they are aware of some of the stark realities, and yet they demand for, their pound of flesh in these difficult, the circumstances. So for me, I would say that, look, all of us must have Ghana at heart. We're in difficult times. Now, when Labour comes out and agitate, and they start by issuing ultimatums to the government, then you want to ask yourself what the intention of some of the leadership of Labour really is. They are talking about the increase in utility tariffs and so on. But at the same time, they will not tell the people of this country that they actually participated actively in some of those utility tariff increases or adjustments, if you like. They participated in it and were convinced that it was necessary for us to increase tariffs in the circumstances. But today, they will turn around and use that as a basis for justifying their claims that times are hard, cost of living has gone high.
You are not suggesting that for participating in those processes, they are stopped from asking for their pound of flesh, like you say?
They may not be stopped, but from the moral standpoint, I think that there are problems there if they demand.
What they were asking for is a livable wage.
But, Sammy,
they ought to survive.
Sammy, the truth of the matter is that they are the formal sector, and I can tell you that salaries quadrupled in some cases following the implementation of the single spine pay policy over the period of implementation. And so when you now turn around and suggest that cost of living has gone high and so on and so forth, and we're saying that part of the problem has to do with the implementation of that single spine pay policy, of which they are the principal beneficiaries, then you know where the problem is coming from.
Okay, that's supposed to be just your preliminary comments, and we'll get into the details of their diagnosis of the economy and some of the advice that they give to government. Don't go to IMF, don't sign EPA, and a host of other things that they want government to not to do and to do. Kweku, what do you say to what workers have gotten now?
Well,
there were those who suspected that the ultimatum will not be met. They wouldn't get anything by that time.
I'm not sure if government had the luxury of an alternative. They had to go for negotiation and they had to find a way out. So a certain compromise. Listening to all sides, it appears that there's a compromise that has been struck. I'm not too sure the workers are entirely excited about the percentage increase they got. But when you go for negotiations, you obviously know you can start from a certain level, knowing that that's not what you are going to get. Then you negotiate and try and get something. So for now, since the three parties, and by this I mean the employers, the labor, and the government, appear to have struck a deal, what else can one say but to agree that, look, this is what they've struck. But you see, we should be careful also not to reduce this whole thing to just the minimum wage matter,
right,
or the COLA matter.
Right.
The thing goes beyond that, but it appears it's been highlighted. As you realize, the TUC boss mentioned some other things, the Atuabo Freeport matter, corruption, and the new liberal economic thing. So it's a bigger picture out there, but I can understand why we are immediately focusing on salaries and wages, because they are of immediate effect of some sort. But really, now who costs up in terms of the state of the economy? The last time I checked, maybe I'm wrong, and you can correct me quickly if I'm wrong, the TUC, does it have a representation on the government economic management team? The organized labor, are they represented there?
I'm not aware.
Yes, I doubt, but if I'm wrong, maybe somebody can chip in that info. The managers of the economy are to be believed. The fiscal and monetary indiscipline, the huge deficits, all those things are not the makings of the workers. The cedi depreciation, the high interest rates, the energy crisis, those are fundamentally not the creation of labor, of organized labor. So really, when we come to the bottom line, it is those who we have entrusted with the responsibility to manage the economy that must take the ultimate responsibility and blame for that. Okay, so it's the quality of management. When the single spine salary policy was being initiated, of course, it had been crafted and put in place in terms of the laws. The Fair Wages Commission came in 2007, so many things had been done. But I recall that the Mills administration deferred the implementation of that policy for a whole year in order to re-examine its implications and other things, and to reintroduce it, I think, somewhere 2010. So really, and come 2012 election campaign, it was a key campaign issue. Who do I blame? The workers? The beneficiaries of that policy? Look, in the course of the, building up that whole structure, workers took part in they participated in the consultative processes. In fact, all stakeholders. And the bottom line was that it was the government of the day that had to initiate action. When you were initiating action, I was thinking that you could do the implications. If I didn't bring that document here, that cabinet document I brought here once, all the implications were calculated as to this percentage increment, what are the consequences for the economy. All those things had been done.
Right.
I presume that when it was deferred for a year, similar exercises were performed. I cannot believe that government would have gone into that exercise without calculating the consequences of what that policy meant. So really, I have a very serious difficulty with those who point to the single spine as a key factor in our economic woes. I disagree. I'm unable to accept that particular argument.
Okay, as I announced earlier, your views are welcome. 1422. Let's know them if you have questions to ask. Bring them also. 1422 and 1760. Those are the text lines that you should send your messages to. You can also post your comments on our Facebook wall, or you can put them directly to Newsfile at myjoyonline.com. Now by Godwin Adahone. Good morning and welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you.
Right. Now, you're just joining us. If you could just have just a minute bite on the new, wage that labor has gotten, then we'll move on briefly.
Well, the workers have been agitating for some increase or adjustment in their remuneration.
Right.
Having regard to what they say is the rising cost of living, and if they have got something. But
is it what they say or what is really the case?
Well, I think that there is general consensus that living conditions are a bit difficult.
Okay.
So there is no debate about that. But the debate, however, has had to do with whether, given the state of the economy, employers generally and government in particular would be in a position to increase wages. So I think that has been the center of the debate. And in that context, if today labor has got something and apparently okay with it, I would think that that's okay. But going forward, we need to work very hard and creatively and innovatively in our respective positions so that we can grow the economy. Because all of this is a function of the economy. The ability of employers to pay a living wage and not just a minimum wage is a function of the economy. And demand for wage and remuneration increase will also be dictated by the economy. So if the economy is in such a healthy state, that will ensure that at least prices of goods and services, basic goods and services, are relatively stable. We may not have to have this situation, but it looks as if there is much more to do in terms of production.
Pops up now, and they are already sounding, some warning to government that this is supposed to be effective May. We want to see that this reflects in our salaries. If it doesn't, then we're going to see them back on the streets, probably. Question is, we know that the government presently is saddled with that situation. It's unable to make statutory payments. It's, bedeviled left, right, center. How is government where is it now going to find the money to make these payments?
The point has to do with the claim that government is not able to make statutory payments. And by statutory payments, I would understand that those subject to correction to mean payments that will enable the agencies to work.
Function, right.
Good. And it is such payments that will, generally speaking, result in the production of goods and services.
Right.
So if you are giving money to workers without giving them the money that will generate the goods and services, then we are compounding the situation. So, in my view, I thought that employers, workers, trade unions would have to have an understanding of what it is that we need to do in order to strengthen the economy to meet our respective demands. But it appears, to me that there is mistrust among the social partners, and that sometimes fuels the entrenched positions that some persons take. But we need to work hard at generating confidence, generating trust, and then being open, so to speak, on some of these critical issues. That is the only way we can obtain the cooperation that we need.
Dominic, the PPP, Progressive People's Party, that in recent times has been doing a lot of some very critical analysis of sectors of the economy or the states, has been saying that what the TUC should be looking at is to demand, economic stability and not minimum wage. That's not what to do.
That's why Koko was saying that we have people who are managing the economy. It's not PPP or TUC that is managing the economy. It is the management of the managers who are managing the economy. It is their task. That is the economic management team headed by the vice president. It is their task. And then, of course, ultimately the president, because he's the one who's in charge.
They don't do that in isolation.
I think that the whole economic atmosphere is not good. It's not good, and if you had listened to me, it's not good because I said there is no money in the system. Trust me. Government pays like this. We have what we call compensation, which government will naturally do everything to pay. Salaries and other things, what they call compensation. They pay off when at the end of the month, they try to pay off. Then they pay what we call interest on the loans that they've collected, because internal and external. Then the next one is the statutory payment. That's Get Fund, Common Fund, National Health Insurance. Trust me, after government has paid the first two, the other two are other government responsibilities, like subvented agencies, what you're talking about, the ministries giving them money, school feeding, and all those kind of things. They are the other government agencies. Then the last one is the contractors, the one that government paid directly, the contractors and other things. And then investment. If there's money, they will do investment. But trust me, when government pays compensation and interest, they don't have money again. This government, that's the truth. The real truth is that the moment government pays compensation, which is salaries and other things in terms of compensation, the interest rate after that, government is faced with liquidity problem. They don't have money again. So they default in paying statutory funds. So Get Fund is defaulted, Common Fund gets defaulted, National Health Insurance Fund gets defaulted. Though by law, government is supposed to pay them that money before they pay compensation and others. Because by law, you are supposed to pay. You can't default. But government doesn't have the money. It is also because government is not taking care of the subvented agencies. So the workers go, you give them their salary, and they sit there and fold their hands because government is not giving them the money.
That's the irony
that is the problem. So when the president is saying there's low productivity, it is low because government is not giving them the money for them to go and work. People go, they don't have even fuel to fuel their cars. The police are suffering. All other government agencies don't have the money. You ask all educational institutions the last time they received their subvented agencies.
Isn't that the reason it should have been easier for all to come to agree that for this time, let's all tighten our belts a bit and allow that the money that would have come to us directly should be put into such use that we can use it to generate some more money.
The survival first. People have to survive. People have to feed their families. You cannot put 3 square meal a day for your children. Your children are crying. And you say that you have to allow government to stabilize? Who has caused it? Look, we all know that all our problems is the 12% or 12.5% of the budget deficit. We all know that that is the biggest problem we are facing today, and we are paying through our nose because of that. Who caused the 12.5% during 2012 financial year? It's government. It is very government. It was not as if another government was in place and NDC just came. They have been handling this economy since 2009. President Mills came and met a budget deficit of 6%, and NDC insulted MPP and used very harsh words, reckless, some words that were quaint I've never heard before. That's just 6%. In 2012, we had a budget deficit of 12.5%. That is the beginning of our downfall as a state. Until we correct it, we will continue to suffer that.
Right.
And today, look, last year, it was 11.8%. I'm talking of 2013. 11 point. So you have 12.5%. Last year, 11.8%. This year is going to be 12% again. Unless we correct it, government must not spend what they don't have. IMF told them, they came and met us in Parliament, the Finance Committee, and told us, let your government know that they should spend within their means. You have a budget deficit, you have a budget of 31 billion. Government cannot raise more than 20 billion. So government should spend within the 20 billion. It's as simple as that. Look, and it is never true. Trust me, it is never true that 3/4 of our wage bill takes our revenue. It is not true at all. In fact, the last time the finance minister came to Parliament, he pegged the figure at 53%. We in the minority have always said that the figures we have is 45%. It's never more than anything. And the finance minister put it, go and look at the finance minister's representation to Parliament. He put it at 53%. So I don't know where he got 75%.
James, the argument has always come up that when it gets to this point, then we hear government talking about productivity and low productivity and everything else. Whose job is it? If I'm employing you, I set the standard. I give you your performance, you know, what you're supposed to do. If you don't do, then, you know, the right sanctions are applied. But it doesn't appear that, you know, government is making sure these standards are there and everybody, you know, is playing according to them. And yet we come to complain about low productivity.
Well, I think that it's a collective responsibility. We are here talking about organized labor. We have various, statutory bodies which are in place to ensure that whenever productivity is low as a result of the complicity of some of the employees, action is taken. We cannot overnight, you see, resolve this problem which has bedeviled us for such a long time. But clearly the problem has been identified that, look, there is low productivity.
The president complained about that.
That is right. So organized labor has a role to play. Everybody has a role to play. It's not just the managers of the economy.
It's an annual ritual. We complain about low productivity. That's the end of it.
And so that is why we're saying that it takes the collective to resolve the problem. Because, I mean, look, most of these, if you like, those in the public sector, some of them leave their offices before 5. When it's Friday, by 3, if you go there, you want to transact business, you don't meet anybody. Now, if you are somebody who
2 o'clock they are gone,
who requires
no one is supervising to be sure that they are not leaving there by 5.
Well, the point is, if you go there as a citizen, you want some service to be delivered, and the person who ought to deliver that service is not there. You also have a duty to ensure that the person is reported so that action is taken. But oftentimes, people would simply turn away and say, well, I'll go and come another day. So that is why I'm saying that this whole thing
should not be different in private entities and in the state organizations. It shouldn't be.
Well, it shouldn't be.
It takes the outsider, the one who is coming for your services, to go complain about the fact that you are not available.
No. If the person is a private service provider, you have an alternative. You simply turn away and go to a different place where service delivery is excellent.
What I mean is that in the private, organization, there's strict supervision.
Well, you may have a point there, but let me admit that yes, a problem has been identified, and we're saying that let us all, as a people, try and resolve it. the president is committed to ensuring that productivity is increased, it is enhanced. But organized labor clearly has a role to play too. Is it the case that all the time they would only agitate when cost of living goes high? TUC should move beyond that and demand from their members to step up productivity. So government has a role to play. They equally have a role to play.
The question of productivity.
Well. You know, leadership, management, the quality of management, and the kind of guidelines and programs you put in place are critical for the productivity my brother is talking about. So it is not a question of just what the labor does, what organized labor or the workers will do. They can go there and exert all the energies they want to exert. If the programming and the management is faulty, it's faulty. Right. You don't get any productivity. But just a quick one. The finance minister, when he presented his statement, said, and I'm quoting from the Hansard of 1st April 2014, he says, a framework within the whole forum on public sector pay sustainability to reduce the wage bill as a share of tax revenue from 57% in 2013 to 35% 27. So it is 57%. Now, if you go back to, and it's coming to the point I made earlier as to Nahu Kosam, if you go back to the critical policy actions that the president outlined, you know, for between September to December 2012, this was on the 40th day of his assumption of office. You can, let me read paragraph 8. It says, I've instructed the economic management team to take immediate steps to consolidate and sustain our achievements in maintaining macroeconomic stability by executing the following without delay. A, continue to hold down inflation. B, continue to hold the depreciation of the city against the major currencies. And C, maintain discipline in government expenditure so that we do not incur unplanned expenses, especially in an election year. Did we fulfill this? Complete failure on all the 3 lines. And who was the one causing it? It's the managers of the economy, plus the leadership of the state. Let's be frank with it. And that is why we are suffering what we are suffering and having all the agitations we are having. For me, that's the bottom line. Now, I'm told that the whole General Secretary says we should go and chop the Heritage Fund. Excuse my bad, poor English.
You mean General Secretary of?
Of the ruling party. He says we should chop the Heritage Fund. That's a reflection of the state of desperation, where you are at your wit's end. So now let's go for what we are keeping for as investment for the future. Let's chop it now. He says that's common sense.
Yeah, but the economic money is our money. He says it's difficulty. He says difficulty. We should accept.
He says it's economic sense. When you've depleted what is available. You have mismanaged what is available. We should now go for the alternative and chop it quickly. It's a sign of desperation. Somebody be at his wit's end.
You see, I don't think that General Secretary's remarks is any sign of desperation.
Or somebody at his wit's end.
You see, listening to Honorable Nitiwu, he seems to suggest that the problem must be placed squarely at the doorsteps of the managers of the economy.
And that's the point too. Consistently, that's the point he makes.
And they ought to know that we have gotten to a stage where this country naturally would experience some shocks. And he knows it. Our newfound middle income status is a factor. It's clear. And the president alluded to that issue, I mean, when he addressed the May Day celebrations. You see, when the MPP was in power, they all projected that Ghana would become a low middle income country by 2020. That was the projection. But all of a sudden, we became a low middle income country.
Within the governing party itself, there are calls for the president to sack the finance minister.
Yes.
Why is that so?
Come again?
There are calls within the governing party itself for the president to sack the minister, the finance minister. Why is that so?
People are entitled to their views, and it's normal. I mean, in political circles, you can expect people to call for
the two of them, like
the
you
removal
said, are talking about the leadership.
Yes,
and
I am saying that
non-performance.
there are certain, I mean, realities which transcend, I mean, leadership and management of the economy. For instance, I have referred to our newfound middle income status, which clearly requires us to step up productivity, which is to some extent not too reliable. Now, we're talking about 2012, and I'm responding to Honorable Nitiwul. He talks about budget deficit in 2012. But he knows too well that in an election year, you have capital flight because of the uncertainties. I mean, we're in a very turbulent sub-region where people think that after elections, you'd have violence ensuing and so on. So these are realities that they must all concede, I mean, in their submissions. But when you pretend that, I mean, in an election year, everything is normal, I know he will talk about overspending, but I can tell you that the truth of the matter is that in every election year, there is capital flight. When the MPP superintended over national elections, there was capital flight and there was, a budget deficit. That is the truth of the matter.
It's about the margin of the budget deficit.
Well, if the margin, whatever, he talks about 6% and all of a sudden it shot up to 12% in 2012. But they don't want us to talk about that fact. And but consistently I will talk about it.
I see.
In 2012, we implemented the single spine pay policy. That is the truth of the matter. That accounted partly for the budget deficit.
The man doesn't know what he's talking about.
Who doesn't know what he's talking about?
We didn't implement.
No.
We didn't implement single spine in 2012.
Right.
Yeah.
First of all,
was the implementation in progress or not?
Excuse me.
Obviously.
By 2012,
it was in progress.
But you didn't.
No, you didn't. By 2012,
no.
Samson. Excuse me. By 2012, government had released a statement to say that 98% were already captured. So by 2011, over 90% of the workers, public workers, had been captured under the single spine anyway. So don't put your blame on single spine. Secondly, let me tell you something. I said compensation and interest is our problem. Compensation, if you are putting the blame on single spine, who caused it? The framework had been there. There was a team that was working on the SSS.
Okay.
We've
gone over that point over and again.
What you did was to replace all of them. So in implementing the single spine, you did not implement it well. Secondly, who asked government to go and borrow the way they borrowed? And you are not paying interest rate. Who asked you?
Okay. Kwaku, there's a point you wanted to draw attention to.
In his, that critical policy statement, says our government did not hesitate to implement the single spine salary structure that was passed on from the previous administration, despite the limitations in resources. With all the challenges, the implementation of the single spine salary structure is almost complete, and most of our public servants are enjoying benefits of the improved remuneration. I am directing the Fair Wages and Salary Commission to take the remaining steps towards completion of the single spine salary structure by the end of this year. So we were at the end point, and as the President indicated, it had almost been completed. We were not beginning the implementation there. Yes. So, and my view is that right from 2010 to 2012, let's stop there, you had to be very sure of the implications. Each budgetary increment should have come with calculations as to what the implications and consequences were. Right. In the document, the policy document behind single spine, all those things had been structured out.
Kwaku, please continue from the point where let's move on and look at the other issues that the TUC is looking at about the economy. And one of his concerns were raised by Kofi Asamoah as well about the Atuabo project. Now, they say, for example, don't sign EPA in its present state, don't go for a bailout from IMF, and a whole lot of issues. And the President responded and said there are homegrown measures that are going to be put in place to ensure that the economy gets back on track.
Well, EPA, we've debated it exhaustively here.
Right.
I really still don't have a very direct position on it. I myself am still studying.
They are asking for money. They say the President or the managers of the economy should not go for money from IMF.
Did they say that?
They said don't go for the bailout. Yes, they did.
No, that's different. They didn't say that we should reject IMF assistance. Okay, bailout come in special situations, and they come as a special program with all sorts of stringent conditionalities. So that's a specific. When the economy is down and it's in an emergency state as we see today, you might go for a bailout. But that is different from continuing the collaboration with IMF. After all, we are members. We became members of the IMF and World Bank somewhere in 1958 under the socialist-oriented government of Asadi.
Mr. Kofi someone said that it is the IMF-sponsored policies that have brought us almost to the brink. It is our view that development cannot be achieved through market fundamentalism being professed by the IMF.
That's an ideological and philosophical position. And I'm not surprised that Labour will speak it that way. That's their language. Indeed, I happen to be on the left of the political spectrum. That's my language as well. But when you are in government, you are compelled by the reality to be pragmatic. So you then become very structured in your policies, in meeting those challenges and the rest. But ideologically, that's the language. And there's some truth in that. We have been doing structural adjustments since 1983. And we went on to enhance structural adjustment. We came to economic recovery program. No, I think economic recovery program started before the two. And we are where we are. So there is a basis for the cynicism that the TUC is putting out relative to IMF, World Bank. I think that you can go to IMF, you can deal with the World Bank, but you have to be... Look, Kufuor's administration dealt with IMF and World Bank, but progressively went out the country from, not entirely, but it reduced. So it got to a state that budgetary support that came from the donor community had came to around 45 to 50%. I may be wrong in terms of the exactitude of the figures. Those who know can correct me. But there was an attempt, conscious, progressive attempt to reduce the dependency of Ghana on IMF and World Bank. I am for that in terms of the policy approach, but I'm not too sure. It's not like an association, a football association, where you can disengage your membership just like that. It doesn't go that way, you know. So having said that, you see, the Atuabo thing, I think for the first time, you know, the stage was a very important stage, a very important platform, and for the General Secretary of the TUC to take it up and articulate it in that forceful manner, I think was good, because it's been going on. The GPHA workers and other unions have raised it, and it doesn't appear as if government is listening, apart from the fact that it appears to violate the law, the existing legal regime, which is the PNDC law, something, I brought it here, I've forgotten where I placed the PNDC law 160, you know, and it appears that the way things are going, the GPHA's own jurisdiction is at stake. They have been invaded, and that is problematic. Even we've invested about $250 million to do the Takoradi Port expansion. From what the workers are saying, at the end of the day, it appears that even that project will be undermined in a way, in terms of the value for money that we are seeking to do. So that is one area I think Labour and civil society should start interrogating seriously, and government should begin to listen to what people are saying, the voice of reason that people are putting into this particular case.
You're still here on Newsfile, on Multi TV and Joy 99.7 FM. Now, Godwin, Mr. Kofi Asomugha says that, and I quote, "Our state has become deformed and unable to perform, to undertake the simple task of governing. All the high and low profile corruption that have become all too pervasive are symptoms of a weak and failing state. We need to rescue and rehabilitate the state and place at the front and center of national development." When you hear him say this, and he says it directly to the managers of the economy, do you expect him and his people to play a certain role, like James is saying?
It's an arrangement. I mean, the employment relationship basically is an arrangement for mutual benefit. So on the basis of that, both parties have a responsibility to ensure that that collective entity which generates the wealth is in a strong position to do that. If you look at the Labour Act, that specifies the rights and obligations of employers and workers. there is one responsibility which the Act imposes on both workers and employers. The workers must protect the interests of employers. Employers must protect the interests of workers. Clearly, that establishes a framework for cooperation. Of course, I mean, if you are working, you are supposed to be producing. And then if you produce, you intend to earn a share of that which you produce. And it is the responsibility of government to do the distribution, or the employer for that matter, to do the distribution in a very fair manner. So if you talk about both parties having a responsibility, that is not a debate. And when workers blame employers and then employers blame workers, it's just a point of both parties missing the point. Because as Wekubako said earlier, who determines the goals? I mean, the primary responsibility is for the employer or the manager to determine the goals. But of course, in determining the goals, you do that in a democratic manner, which means that the workers will have to be involved in it. So if the goals are collectively set, then it becomes untenable for either party to seek to undermine the goals.
But they point to specific situations where the managers are not doing well. They say, for example, that the regime of investment rules that favor foreign investors over domestic investors, all of that is not the best. They need to look at all of these
Well,
factors.
to a certain extent, that claim is valid. But to another extent, you may have to deal with the reality. And the reality is that you may have the resources, but will not have, I mean, the resources in their natural state, but may not have the capacity technologically or in terms of finance and related matters to exploit them and bring them to the state where you can then distribute and then enjoy. So you definitely have to deal with foreign investors in one way or the other. Now, don't forget that Ghana is not the only economy that I mean, maybe seeking foreign investors. I mean, there are many economies that need them. So it becomes competitive. If you want them to come, then you must create a certain enabling environment. But that is not to say that the enabling environment should include sacrificing certain core fundamental values. And I think those should be the general principles that we should be looking at.
I see.
We cannot wage a war against external or foreign investment, but we cannot also sacrifice the lives of the domestic citizens and residents just in the name of foreign investors.
Right.
But bottom line, the issue of corruption, I mean, that is also a very serious matter. But I'm sure if we were to take the clock of time back as far back as 1958 and read the reports, it will just be as if you are speaking about today's matter.
It will be like President Kufuor saying it's been with us since
Exactly.
Adam.
I mean, I am sure 10 years to come, we'll be talking, and if we are alive, we'll be talking the same thing. So it means that we really have to have a certain, approach to the issue of corruption.
He's talking about what the role of you know, the workers, public service, whatever workers should be. But when we're too familiar with some of these things, when Kofi Asamoah mentions widespread corruption in high and low places, cronyism, incompetence, and extreme partisanship, and he said these have worsened the economic situation. What is your expectation? What are your expectations?
I think he's right.
To change some of these situations.
No, he's right. I think we need a president who will crack the whip. Seriously, we need somebody, a leader who will crack the whip. Otherwise, trust me, this will continue.
Example of situations where you feel he ought to have cracked the whip and he hasn't done.
But if a government, for example, is taking, let's take Woyomi, for example. The government is taking Woyomi to court to say that this man has defrauded us fraudulently and gotten 51 million Ghana cedi. And all the people, the main actors who got Woyomi to get the money are working free, and some of them are still in government. And you say that somebody should not say that we need someone who can crack the whip. What happened to that? Those in the Attorney General's Department, those in the Finance Ministry, all those who signed those contracts for Woyomi to be able to defraud the state. Somebody resigned, a whole prime minister resigned in a country just because a boat collapsed and people died. He had nothing to do with it. But just because the boat...
We don't do that in Africa. So
we don't do that in Africa. But that's what I'm saying, that when it is so clear to everybody that people have aided, okay, people have aided and will reward them with more positions. I'll give you an example. My own speaker in parliament, for example, has been deputy speaker, has been rewarded. When he clearly advised government that we didn't have a case. So if you cannot crack the whip, I'm just using the Women case as an example. There are several of them, from Suba to Jida to all of them. Nobody is being punished.
The ones you just mentioned, what else do you want the president to do?
I am saying that in each of these cases, let people get punished for their crimes.
No, but the ones you just mentioned, the Suba, Jida, and all those things, what else do you want the president to do?
Oh,
there have been investigations, people have been implicated. Those who have been implicated presently are standing, some are standing trial, some are being investigated, monies are being refunded. What do you want him to do?
So what is the minister, at that time, the minister who did all the signing, why is the minister still at post? Not even resignation, not even forced to resign. Not only is he not being forced to resign, he's been given a much bigger portfolio. I think that we should be more serious. Trust me, we should be more serious than this. But I was just telling you something. I just wanted to say that I believe that bailout from the IMF should have been the last resort. Anybody who has met the IMF before, in fact, they have met us this year alone about 3 times. We in the Finance Committee of Parliament. They have 3 things they are demanding government, if government were ever to go. One is what we call full cost recovery. They still believe that government has no business supporting its own citizens, and that whether it is fuel or it is all the services, utilities, government should make sure that the citizens pay fully for it. Secondly, reduction of wage bill. They claim that the government has done almost everything to raise taxes. So they don't see what government will be able to do to raise taxes again. So the only thing is for government to reduce its expenditure, especially wage bill. And that's, if you remember, Dr. Akoto mentioned, it was right after the IMF meeting. That's why he said government is thinking. He never said government. He said government is thinking of retrenchment. And that's the IMF. If we go for a bailout, IMF will demand we do retrenchment, especially with the public sector, because they think they don't understand why around 700,000 people can spend
and you don't buy that.
Can spend over 50%.
It is one of the reasons, because of the aspect of retrenchment. It is one of the reasons you don't want government to go for IMF.
I think that there's mismanagement and corruption is what is costing us. Take the Auditor General's report. The Auditor General says that in 2013 alone, it was, no, 2012, it was 4.5 billion. Because we haven't dealt with the 2013 report, even though I have it. It was mismanagement and corruption cost Ghana 4.5 billion Ghana cedi. Just imagine that we could just reduce it to just a little over 1 billion. We are saving this nation another 3 billion. That's where our problem is.
I see.
It is not the workers.
And the solutions. And he talks about, you know, the president not cracking the whip, or the government not cracking the whip enough. Well, I disagree, for example, with his example of Wyoming, because he's not been convicted by any court of competent jurisdiction yet. But the question is, what from where you sit ought to be done that probably is not being done, and that's why we're still where we are?
I think that this is in relation to the speech of Kofi Asamoah. Let me respond directly to his suggestion that there is incompetence, there is cronyism, there is corruption. And Honorable Nitiwo wants to make political capital out of that statement. And some of you rightly pointed it out to him that, you know, if you were to roll back time, clearly you would see that this government has done well in its bid to fight corruption.
The government critics say it's not doing enough. He's giving you examples of people who appear in the public's eye to have been rewarded, rather than suffering some, you know, demotions and punishments.
It's unfortunate for Honorable Nitiwu to suggest that somebody like the first deputy speaker has been rewarded. What did Honorable Batinodro do? Batinodro, as a lawyer, a deputy attorney general, advised, he gave a legal opinion a legal opinion can be right or wrong. If it turns out that that opinion that Honorable Batinudru proffered at the time had problems with hindsight, you don't, I mean, conclude that the man ought to have been asked, and that if he has been elevated to the position of First Deputy Speaker, he has been rewarded.
That's not a view he holds alone.
Well, I think that those who hold that view really should come again, because it's unfortunate. Some of you are a lawyer, and you know what legal opinions mean. An opinion remains an opinion, unless
and when I give it wrongly, I lose that client.
Well, you may lose that client, but we don't always go to court to win. Sometimes you go to court because you have formed an opinion, but that opinion is then tested in court, and judgment passed. When judgment is passed over your opinion and it turns out that it wasn't correct, it doesn't mean that you're not a good lawyer. And so if Honorable Batinudru gave an opinion and that opinion turned out subsequently not to have actually conformed with certain rules, but eventually some people have been charged and prosecuted, they are being tried, why do you want us to jump the gun? But it is important to place on record that, you see, you don't just round people up and prefer charges against them. Dockets are built over a period of time after investigations have been done. When investigations are going on, we know that normally you indict people or you let them go off. You let them take leave. Well, I'm making particular reference to Wyoming. Okay. Wyoming has been charged with the offense of defrauding by false pretenses and other related charges. That is a serious charge. You think other people should have been rounded up and prosecuted alongside, but if you look at the nature, the very nature of that charge, you know, you would understand why those honorable Nituwo things ought to have been charged, I mean, alongside Wyoming have not been charged. Because the state is saying that he defrauded all those people who fell within the scheme. And so wait, let the court pass judgment. Look, having said that, Sammy, this government has shown a lot of commitment, which is unprecedented. They were in power, MPP was in power, and I always make reference to their own period when they had the opportunity to govern this country. Was there not cronyism? Maybe incompetence? Maybe that is why the people jettisoned them and gave you the opportunity. We are saying that this is a president who is prepared to, of course, instruct his ministers to set the investigative machinery in process whenever allegations of corruption have been made. Did we see that under President Kufuor when they had the opportunity to govern for 8 years? Our own party men are standing trial. Is that not an indication that something is being done about corruption? So when you seize an opportunity like May Day and suggest to the good people of this country that the government is not doing anything about corruption and that is partly to blame for our economic challenges, I think that there is some element of dishonesty there. I see. All right, could we just minutes, I wanted to talk about loan rule because it's important. Okay, do that quickly. Because, do that quickly. You see, the Kofi Asamoah seemed to suggest that when the loan report comes into operation, it's going to undermine national sovereignty and, of course, security. I think if you look at the agreement, the security aspect of the management of the port has clearly been reserved for government. So our immigration would be there, customs would be there, security would be there. Our security apparatus would manage the port. These facts must be brought to the attention of the good people of this country. Some suggestion has been made that the free port, of course, if it comes into existence, it would contradict the act which sets up the Ghana Ports and Harbors, Authority. That is a matter for us to consider as a people. But let us not, make suggestions which clearly do not, conform to the reality. The reality of the matter is that we are not going to shirk our responsibility so far as security management and control at that port, is. These are facts. I don't know whether, Kofi Asamoah clearly has seen the agreement or is listening to what others are saying. But in the agreement, that is not the case at all. So how is our sovereignty going to be undermined. There are investors who are going to pump into this economy an amount of $600 million. Okay. You see, government is not bringing in any equity in any form.
Quickly, briefly, and then we take a break at this point.
Well, I'm sure the GPHA workers and management are listening. I'm sure TUC...
You have gone over the law a number of times. And
yes. I was just trying to...
How that is an infringement even upon of the law.
But I couldn't find it.
Okay.
There's something like that.
Yeah, so move on. You were asking for the opportunity to speak to some other issue briefly.
Yeah, you know, it was about the Woyome thing.
Right.
Quick one. There were allegations of corruption under Kufuor's administration that were investigated. Indeed, those even against the sitting president himself were investigated by a creature of the Constitution, the Shraj. When the VRA saga exploded and all sorts of allegations were made against Dr. Reku Broby, we all recall that 3 levels of investigations were conducted, okay, by the ministerial committee. There was the Auditor General's investigations. There was also national security investigation. Eventually, even Parliament took up the matter and set up what they considered to be a bipartisan probe. So let's not create the impression that all instances of allegations of corruption were left to go free. But I can count from Nkrumah to today. We had instances of corruption besetting all governments. Some were investigated, some were not investigated. It's a real problem for us as a developing nation. But to talk about Mr. Batino, I was really, really sad when the electorate did not punish him by voting against him. But then I was sad that when the executive decided to give him a position using parliament. Yeah, I was very sad. It's the same with the former GIPC boss. The electorate didn't punish him. They rewarded him with an electoral victory, and I was really sad about that. So that's the situation we find ourselves in. But you see, it was clear that there were some administrative or some level of even negligence. I was going to say criminal negligence, but I'm told by lawyers to be careful when I'm using such terminologies. But beyond the fraud, there were people in the system. Have you forgotten that people came on this show to defend it? Have you forgotten that your own radio station was a channel where people justified it? So you see, it is not a question of somebody expressing a legal opinion. In the case of Mr. Batino, he actually publicly joined the debate and gave grounds for justifying why a particular payment had been made. Here, and on this program, my own good friend, I think Alex, and the rest, they came with the appropriate documentation to support the point long before government decided to check Woyome out. That is after some of us had produced alternative documents to show that some fraud had taken place. So to be honest, that reward, well, I say it's the electorate that did it. Who am I to challenge the Cape Coast electorate? You know. So.
All right, this is Newsfile, and we are coming to you live from the Multi TV studios. This is your Joy News channel. Umar in Tema, right? Samson, can't we correct the issue of low productivity by using clock in and clock out devices instead of the attendance books? For Christ's sake, we are in an ICT era. I heard about this thing that it was being piloted even at the Auditor General's end. We heard a lot about it. What has happened to it? Let's know. This one says, Samson, why does the government keep talking about increase in productivity when for more than 7 months we have not received a PESWA to work with? I am pre-financing government business from my personal pocket at the expense of my family's needs as a head of an institution. That's terrible, isn't it? This one, no name, says low productivity in the public sector is not only as a result of low remuneration, but also as a result of government not being serious in providing right infrastructure in the sector. Sami Nkumasi writes, why is the president wasting his time on productivity? You will go to school and there is no chalk and no lesson notebook, which the president is aware. So how are we going to increase productivity? Please tell him we are ready to work, so he should provide the resources. Well, the president has a lot of work to do, doesn't he? Jerry Amponsa in New York, right? President John Mahama complains over low productivity index rate. President Obama in 2009 advised Ghanaians that the only way we can develop our country is to strengthen our institutions. Park Ganiu, right from Savligu. He says, Asiedu Nketia was speaking in a context and we may not appreciate his argument clearly. So we should not isolate his statement. We should take it in all to be able to appreciate what he had to say. And okay, that's the very final of the comments there.